into space. Traditional longbow archery is something that's closely associated with European martial arts. Archery is something that is universal across the planet. Pretty much every culture developed some form of archery. What we see in particular in Europe and in particular England, the use of the longbow came to a high development. It was used not only as a direct fire weapon, what I mean by direct fire, shooting straight at somebody, but also as an indirect fire weapon, used like artillery to control the battle space so that people coming on an assault would have parts of the battlefield denied from them. So indirect and direct fire. And I'll let Paul take over.
Hey everybody, my name is Lynn. We're here representing the Archery group, and I'd like to introduce you to the band. Paul is our intrepid leader. Neil, Brian, and the road crew right here. Wojtek, Lucas, Simon, thank you guys. This is a really big, huge year for longbow archers because it's the 600th anniversary of the Battle of Agincourt, which happened in October of 1415. And it was the most improbable victory by the English army over the French that you can possibly imagine. They had no business winning that battle, really. There was no love lost between the English and French back then, and I suspect that's still the case today. And the whole thing came to a head at a muddy field in northern France, and the armies faced off against each other, and nobody knows exactly how many were on each side. But the generally accepted numbers are 30,000 French. The army of the French was 30,000. And they were so pretty. They had their tall horses, they had shiny armor, they had colorful flags and banners, and oh my, ooh la la. And by contrast, Henry's army had been on campaign all summer. He had 6,000 in his army. They were starving, they all had dysentery, they were dressed in rags and this close to being dead. And they had no business winning this battle at all. But Henry had another thing that the French didn't have. And of his 6,000, 5,000 of them were longbow archers. And these guys were so good they could shoot between 12 and 15 arrows per minute. So if you do the math, you're looking at 50 to 75,000 or 60 to 75,000 arrows per minute raining down on the French. It wasn't very pretty for the French horses particularly, because if you get a knight off his horse, he's not terribly effective. I want to talk a little bit about the treatment of prisoners. If an English nobleman were captured by the French, he would be treated as a prisoner, but still with relative respect and dignity and civility. Ransoms would be paid. He would, it wasn't as bad as it could be. But for the archers, it was a different story. If the French captured an English archer, mutilation was the order of the day. They would hack off string fingers so the bow couldn't be drawn anymore. And they would hack off all sorts of body parts that, are near and dear to a lot of people. Okay. So, that day the arrows flew at the rate I told you. The French lost very badly, and the English won, and we've been celebrating that victory for 600 years. It's outstanding. There are going to be all sorts of commemorative ceremonies in France this summer at the battlefield, and it's kind of ironic, really, if you think about it. We wanted to do something special to mark the occasion, and somebody suggested we should all drive to the border and shoot arrows into the province of Quebec. But, we'd probably end up being in prison, so that wouldn't work so well. So what we did is we made a special target. That's you. against the French army. And we're each going to be shooting 4 arrows into it. 1 arrow into each fiber. So when that happens, it means the knight's been knocked off his horse. He's essentially out of the battle because he's just wallowing in the mud. And if we happen to hit the fleur-de-lis, that French knight is toast. So you remember when I was telling you about the mutilations? Well, we archers are a little quirky, and we like naming our targets. So that one we call payback. So there we go. 4 arrows.
Ooh la la.
Now, you guys, I bet you, I have a real treat. I'm guessing you didn't think you would get a fashion show today, right? No? May I present from the runways of northern France, Mr. Jean Hardy. Okay, so how many of you guys have watched old Robin Hood movies? Yeah? Okay, and you're probably asking yourself, so why isn't he wearing green tights?
Yeah, Gene, why aren't you?
That's a really good argument.
There are 2 reasons for that. There was no lycra or spandex back in 1450. And the second reason is Gene wasn't having any of it. I think his exact words were, "I'm not wearing tights. No tights."
They were insistent, though. They were really persistent about it.
So I will leave Gene to explain to you the finer points of archer fashion from 1415.
Thank you, Lynn.
Take it away, Gene.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Gene. I'm a scholar with the Archery group, the armed fighting group. You'll see a demonstration of our armored fighters in that group. And I'm also an archer here at AEMMA. In fact, my first class here was in archery with Paul and Lynn. And I'm here to demonstrate to you what an archer marauding across northern France in the late 14th, early 15th centuries would look like at the Battle of Agincourt, for instance. This is typically what you would see an archer wearing. You'll notice I'm not really heavily armored or anything. I'm actually wearing mostly civilian clothes with the addition of a padded coat and a helmet. And that's because, as Lynn said, the archers were typically common people. They were just a common man. A lot of the armored fighters were men of means because armor costs a lot of money. And archers simply weren't, didn't have a lot of resources. They were trained every day in bows and shooting by order of the king, and it's an order, and usually from a very, very young age. So, but they weren't people of means at all. So you didn't get a lot of the extra protection that the armored fighters would get. You'll notice I'm wearing a kettle helm. This is unusual. It's a very common foot soldier's helmet. It's great for arrows coming down on you and cascading off the sides and stuff. I've got a bracer here because bowstrings hurt a lot when they slap your arm, especially for the poundage of the bows that they were using at the time. This is typical sidearm of the archer in the medieval period. It's about a medium-sized bow, a long bow. This one's made out of oak. However, the bows that the archers used primarily at the time were made out of Italian yew, mountain-grown yew. They'd imported from Italy because it was capable of incredible tensile and compressile stresses. So they were drawing weights of bows at about 100 to 120 pounds. So another difference between the archers of then and what you're seeing up here right now would have been the build. these are guys who were training in a bow that was pretty heavy, from about yay big. So they would be these very barrel-chested guys with very, very broad shoulders. In fact, some of the skeletons we found on the Mary Rose wreck, which was a wreck from about that time period, the English Channel. The skeletons on them had very, very pronounced muscle attachments on their bones, which tells us that the musculature on them in the upper body was almost deforming their bone structure because they were so well developed. I'm also dressed a little bit neater. These are freshly laundered. After being on campaign for a summer, you can imagine I would be a little bit more soiled and sullied. So, yeah, I'm a little cleaner looking than your typical archer. Some of the other side arms here. Actually, I'll show you some of the arrows here. I've brought 3 arrows, courtesy of Paul. And we find there's 3 different arrowheads on here. The fletchings are all pretty consistent. These are turkey feathers, but usually the fletchings would have been goose feather, because they're just about the right weight, and they can handle the sailability of an arrow this size. The points, though, are all very different. You'll notice there's one here that's kind of in a V-shape sort of thing, an arrow point shape, and 2 that are a little bit pointier and longer. This one is the one we see most commonly on the battlefield today we've recovered, and that's because they were probably the first line of fire that you would see the archers launching. When there was a charge coming at them, they would just basically throw these things out like artillery and scatter it. And probably the biggest target would have been the horses, to unhorse a lot of the cavalry that were coming in. These guys here, we've got little needle-like points on. One's very, very long and slender, and one's just sort of a stubby but very, very pointed one. It doesn't look like we do a lot of cutting action, and it wouldn't. It was made for penetration. So and we've actually tested these in the saddle here against some armored stuff. But they're made to go through mail rings in the coats of mail and stuff to go through the soldiers. I've got some other arms on here. The archers wouldn't just carry bows because eventually, the charge would get through, so they'd have to have something else to defend themselves with. So I've got a sword, one-handed sword, and a buckler shield for skirmishing. A lot of my buddies in my archer troop may have other weapons like a pole axe, which would be used to unhorse a rider or cavalryman, in which case I would move in with my dagger and move to stab them in the eye slits or under the aventail of their helmets and whatnot. So this is a bit what an archer would look like at the time. Anybody any questions? Okay, well, we're going to move on to a demonstration now. And I think, Lynn, are we going to murder an apple this year?
We're trying to.
We're going to murder an apple. Okay. Are they going to
demonstration, we're going to shoot at the archer's favorite target, which is a nice, big, juicy Fuji apple. We call this one Do Tell. That will, boys.
Trying to dodge.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you get it in spot?
Shoot that. Clear.
Our group shoots on Saturday afternoon between 4 and 6. In addition, Paul McAuliffe is conducting his, I think, 8th or 9th bow making course starting February 22nd. He makes the most beautiful longbows. He made this one for me, and I love it. But this class allows people to take the course and come away with it with their own bow, which is really cool.
Any information you want about our archery activities or about the bow making course itself, you can get from leaflets, handouts we have on the small table close to the front door. So if you're interested in either the archery or the bow making, just pick up one of those on your way out, and all of the contact information is on them. So hope to see some of you. Thank you very much.